Hi, and welcome to another episode of Freshwaves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and Freshwaves is playing every Wednesday on Whistle FM right after the 10 o'clock news, and you can hear us whenever you'd like on the podcasts on the website at Freshwaves.ca. We have a terrific show lined up today. This is Black History Month, and in honor of Black History Month, we're going to be speaking with Trinidadian Canadian writer, playwright, and community engagement artist, Fiona Raye Clarke. Hi, Fiona. Welcome to Fresh Waves.
Hi, Bren. Thank you for having me.
We're really privileged to have you on the show today. And I would like to start by just getting a little bit of background about who you are and how you came to be a writer.
Right, yeah. I'm originally from Scarborough generally, but I moved around a lot. And in that process of kind of being what I call an oil baby, I was born in Calgary. I got exposed to a lot of different ideas and stories, and really got a love for reading that carried throughout. And I was first inspired to kind of start writing professionally when I lived for a bit in Trinidad as a young adult, and really wanted to tell stories from my perspective as a Black person, and started reading more of those stories because there aren't that many out there, especially within Canada. It's not a perspective that's very widely distributed and known about. And so my first work as a community engaged artist was to receive some funding from the now defunct Office of the Provincial Advocate for Children and Youth, and put together a collection of Black youth stories called Bazity, which is a Trinidadian Creole word for kind of dazed and confused, because that's kind of how I felt as somebody who was born here but has roots elsewhere, and like as a second generation Canadian who doesn't quite fit. I thought it was quite fitting, and so I gathered a bunch of youth to do that, and then we did another collection later on entitled Black Like We, especially after all of the fallout and start of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I decided from there to kind of pursue playwriting. So I wrote my first 10-minute play that was produced by the Inspirato Festival. And then, fast forward to today, I'm now publishing. I'm an Amherst Writers and Artists Method facilitator. And I'm currently working on an expanded version of that play that I created called Broken Windows, that is going to be having an excerpted performance of it over Zoom next week, with support from the TD Bank and Diaspora Dialogues as part of the Black Emerging Playwrights Program. Wow, that's a pretty full life you've got going on there. Now, I read in your bio, too, that you've got a Master's of Laws from Osgoode Hall. Yes, yeah. So I'm trained as a lawyer, but I don't practice. So you
didn't want to be a lawyer?
No, I always wanted to do creative work, but as somebody from a West Indian parentage, it'll be a common thing to hear that, West Indian parents don't think of the arts or anything that isn't a lawyer, doctor, engineer, or teacher, or nurse a profession, and you're really encouraged to get a profession. And so the profession I was encouraged strongly to get was becoming a lawyer. But I was lucky enough to be able to pursue community engaged arts full time, and so that's what I did instead of practicing.
It's interesting. I know quite a few lawyers, quite honestly. My husband's a lawyer, so I through friends and everything, who have said over the years that it's one of the best educations you can ever get, and it's phenomenal for writing because it teaches you really precise writing skills.
Exactly. And how to power read and synthesize a lot of information. So the research aspect of my work isn't really onerous to me. I can easily read like 50 books for one project because that's what I'm used to.
Wow, that's impressive. So, okay, so now it's Black History Month, and in the past, you have done education in Black History Month to schools and things like that. So, let's start at the very beginning. And the reason why I'm asking you all of these seemingly petty questions is, for a smaller community outside of the GTA, like Stouffville is, and of course, Freshwaves airs on Whistle FM, which is a community radio station in Stouffville. Very quickly, over the last maybe 15 years, Stouffville has gone from a very white and white perspective community and changed super quickly into a very diverse community, both in race and in religion. I really do hate the word tolerance. I must say that right off the bat. When I think of tolerance, I think of some annoying little kid underneath the table when I'm on a kidless date night, and I just tolerate them because they're small. So tolerance to me isn't it. To me, it's education, understanding, respect, kindness, and love, the things that build a community. So when you have Black History Month and a Black Lives Matters movement, how do we bring that into the community and educate and bring understanding?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the words that was missing from your description was empathy. And I think that's like the main thing that a lot of white folks, like there's science behind it, that they are kind of trained or, it's automatic for them not to empathize with Black or suffering of people of color, Indigenous people. And a lot of that has been shown to derive from not only obviously white supremacy, but just like a lack of proliferation of representations of other perspectives, of diverse perspectives. So like for me, a large reason why I write the stories that I do and focus on those perspectives, like marginalized voices, marginalized perspectives, voices of color, is that it engenders empathy within the world. Because the more that you immerse yourself in like a story about a person of color, about a Black person, seeing that they have hopes, dreams, fears, they're not superhuman, they're not criminals, they're not dangerous all the time, like all of the stereotypes that are usually portrayed about us, it helps with empathy. And so, instead of calling the police on somebody if there's a situation or grabbing a person or crossing the street, you would have empathy for that person and realize like, oh, they're just a human being, and maybe it's me who's having a weird reaction to them, and like I should question that because I know that they're a human being at the end of the day. So I think like empathy for me is the word, and I think you're totally correct that tolerance isn't at all, because that is implying just putting up with somebody rather than understanding them and like trying to overcome the colonized and white supremacist and white gaze perspectives within all of us.
Okay, now how do we do that? How, when you were teaching to schools, what were some of the things that you would teach them about during Black History Month?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't quite say teaching. It was just like I was invited to do presentations about my work, and just like, kind of like I'm doing here, like talking about my journey as a writer. And like I once gave a very specific presentation on like Black athletics, and so like a history of Black Canadians who achieve athletic excellence. And it's just like showcasing Black achievements and like Black contributions to the Canadian story. But I think there is also a problem with just dwelling on all the contributions and all the excellence, because like a Black person is valuable even if they're not quote unquote excellent. Because that plays into an idea called respectability politics, where we're taught as a society that like if a Black person's speaks articulately, is educated, wears the right clothes, smiles a lot, is non-threatening, they will be less in danger and less in a position of being harmed. But again, statistics and history has shown that that's just not the case. It does not matter how much you've achieved, how much you have in the bank, what you do as a job. It doesn't matter, because your life is always going to be at stake just by virtue of being Black. It doesn't really matter who you are. So while it is great to know about the contributions and people who have contributed to Canada in significant ways, that isn't always the point with Black History Month. I think it's just like, it's great to showcase that, but Black History Month isn't just a month. It's, people are Black all year round, and we achieve things all year round. And so just, spotlighting it at this point is important, because those contributions have been forgotten and buried and lost and are usually swept under the rug. So it is important to have this month. I definitely think that we do need it. But it's also important to as well acknowledge that we should one day hope to move beyond it. So there's also a movement of calling this Black Futures Month. So focusing on not just the past, but also where we're going and headed in the future, and like what Black life could look like. Imagining if Black life was to matter, as I said, not just for being excellent, but just for existing, like what that could look like. So I think the two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've brought up some really interesting points. I was quite disappointed in one of our local papers that published for Black History Month, the history of Blacks in Stouffville. And basically it was several paragraphs of, well, this man lived on this plot of land for this many years and he was Black. And then this other Black man lived on this plot of land for this many years. And then there was another Black family that lived over here on such and such a street. End of article. What does that accomplish? That out of a population at the time of probably 1,000 people, 3 families were Black? To me, it just fell so short of what it should have been. I would have liked to have heard the stories of the families, how they came to be here. Where did they go? Why did they leave? Those kinds of things. Yeah,
I totally agree. Painting kind of thin portraits like that isn't really helpful, as I said, to engendering empathy and understanding in the Black experience. I think just having kind of statistics or surface coverage rather than doing any kind of research into their lives, what their experiences were like, or other people's reactions to them even, sounds like it would have been a much richer and deeper piece. That's what initiatives like Black History Month are about, doing that digging, and it kind of forces people to, in a way, which is helpful. It should be recognized that there's different histories and perspectives and folks who've lived on this land, because we're all kind of visitors and settlers to this land, unless you are an Indigenous person. So did you, when you were starting to write, and you said you went and spent some time in Trinidad, was that basically when you decided that you were going to really embrace the writing part of you? Well, I've always written, so it's not really that it was I wasn't embracing it. It was more this type of stories that I was interested in telling changed. While I grew up in Scarborough, I went to school in North York, which, if you know anything about North York, it was at the time pretty white, and so I didn't see myself represented in a lot of things, the plays and things that we would put on at school, while I was in them, and I was obviously Black, and it was never my story. And so when I went to Trinidad and spent some time, because both my parents live there now, it was just a library full of Black stories gathered from around the world, and stories of color. So it was just so much easier to just immerse yourself. Whereas here, if you go to the library, now in Toronto at least, there's the Rita Cox collection and Parkdale, and so there is a huge dedicated section, or At Malvern Library in Scarborough, there is a section, but usually it's dispersed, and so you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Whereas there, that is the presumed thing. Otherwise, there are, the classics or whatever are in another section. So I was just able to immerse myself in a lot of BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color storytelling. And I was able to kind of shift the way that I told stories to reflect myself rather than reflecting the things that I'd always been exposed to and heard, which were not me and were really catering to the white gaze.
So now you tell the stories. And where do you find the stories?
I'm inspired a lot by my own family or just people that I met in a lot of my travels. So I've lived almost all over the world. And so wherever I go, I kind of look for Black people or surround myself with people of color. And, I hear a lot of their stories and take it, sit with it, and then do some research and come up with things to fictionalize it or just take it further and tell a story that interests me and that suits my curiosities and artistic interests. I will say that my play Broken Windows was inspired by the Samiatim news story and a story about a Muslim family getting shot over a parking space in the States.
Oh my goodness.
Which was ridiculous. And Samiatim is the young man who was shot on the streetcar by police. And so I kind of meshed those two stories together and came up with my play. So that was one case where I did get inspired by the news. But since then, I've brought in my own interests and in things like the Algerian War, because two of the characters are Algerian, or my Black Caribbean heritage. In my community engaged theater practice, I interview people. So that is an opportunity for people to tell me their stories. So I do an oral history Black youth theater project called Intergenerational, and we interview Black elders and then transcribe their words and then create a play out of it. So that is one opportunity that people can just, offer whatever they want to say, and it can get used.
Okay. So that theater project sounds really interesting. Tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I used to work for a community engaged theater company that was assistant artistic directed by a theater artist, a Mohawk theater artist in Toronto named Ange Loft, and she did this type of theater where she would interview Indigenous elders, and at the time she was working on a project called Talking Treaties, so it was interviewing Indigenous elders on the topic of treaties, and I was really inspired by that, and I was like, who are Black elders? I didn't feel like I had access to them, and I don't have my grandparents, they're not alive, or I'm not in touch with them, and so I was like, I would love to have access to some Black elders within my community, and so I, under her mentorship, applied for funding for a project that we named Intergenerational because it was intergenerational and about race, and we were successful, and so she trained us in how to do kind of like this, interviewing people, coming up with good questions, asking people the same questions, using recording equipment, editing those down, transcribing them, pulling out things, and creating a story and an arc to create theater pieces around it. And then we would put those up. So we've done to date 2 shows. We've created 2 plays. The first was called From Their Lips, and we were able to do a production of that at the University of Toronto Scarborough. And then we recently created 2168 Ancestors Rising, which was about imagining Black life in 150 years in the future, because we had just had Canada 150 at the time, and we were going to do a production of that at a school last year, but of course the pandemic hit, so it's on hold for now. But it's been a really great project.
Well, that sounds really fascinating. And we've come up to the halfway mark where we're going to have to take a little break. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. This morning we're talking with Fiona Raye Clarke. We'll be back right after this, so stay tuned. We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. This morning we're speaking with Fiona Raye Clarke for Black History Month. We're talking about Fiona's life as a Trinidadian Canadian writer and a Black writer, and what it's like to be a Black writer here in Canada. So you've done all these interesting projects. What is it like, to say it again, what is it like to be a Black writer in Canada?
Yeah, I think earlier on it was more difficult. It was difficult because I would get told things like for my play, for example, I was told that it was too political, that people aren't interested in political work, and I was pretty discouraged. And I was in a room with only white creators and other than myself. And like a lot of these spaces are run by white artists. But the like kind of shining light in that experience was that I was partnered with a mentor, Donna Michelle St. Bernard, who's currently dramaturging and producing the excerpt of the play now through New Harlem Productions. And she encouraged me to keep going. And so like for me, it's been a matter of finding mentors and spaces that encourage and show you what's possible. Otherwise, you would just get really frustrated because like writing is about rejection and it's about rewriting in general. And then like as a Black writer, you face a disproportionate amount of that rejection and discouragement because, you know, you get told things like I've been told, this sounds really interesting, but I don't see where it would fit. And it doesn't occur to them to like, okay, well, if it's good, then you should be able to make it fit. You know,
for sure.
That's your job, not mine. So like I've taken all of those things, and now like I'm lucky enough to like have people ask me for things that they'd like and to commission me to do work. So I'm really grateful for that. But definitely at the beginning, I was very, very, very discouraged.
So do you think it's because there's been an increased awareness? Do you think it's because the community is starting to form a true community where everybody is included?
I think it's still not a kind of coalesced space like CanLit, which is the name for the Canadian literary space. Like I don't think CanLit is a coalesced being yet. It's just like people have been advocating. So in the time from when I kind of started out till now, like, you know, people are winning Gillers and people are highly visible and they're like placing on the national like book circle in the States. Like people are crossing over with their work, or people's work is getting adapted, like BIPOC work. So I think there's a lot more visibility, and a lot of like broadcasters and other things are paying attention, and like, you know, critical prizes and lists are paying attention to our work. And I think that's what's happening, less than like CanLit has welcomed us. It's more that like people are forging ahead and they're resisting and they're creating the work and like being authentic to their voices and stories. And that's what's happening.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question now, and the reason I'm asking this is because I've heard it so many times since the summer, and people have said, why Black lives matter? Why isn't it all lives matter?
Yeah, I think it's, again, the same thing kind of how we had that discussion around Black History Month. Like, until all lives matter, we need to say that Black lives matter, because it's there's the 400 years of history of it not mattering within white supremacy, colonial history. You have to make that point. You have to elevate those voices. You have to pay special attention. You have to kind of make reparation. And until those things are resolved and repaired, you can't say that all lives matter, because they don't. They just, from a practical standpoint, don't.
Yeah, I guess too, because we through the media, I guess we've started to see how the lives don't matter, with some of the media portraying, the black man who gets pulled over in the U.S. and his life is in danger just by getting pulled over randomly in the middle of the night. People are allowed to drive their cars in the middle of the night, and but for a white man getting pulled over in the middle of the night, it's just getting pulled over to find out if he's been drinking or not. And for a black man getting pulled over, it could be a life-threatening situation. And they are different. So yeah, all lives matter. But in this particular case, we need to embrace Black lives and create the community that's inclusive. They're all good things that will one day create a community of inclusivity where no one's left out. That would be the dream anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And it needs to be repeated, because there is that resistance. I think people need to interrogate why they were resistant to somebody saying Black Lives Matter, to that being a phrase, to that being a movement, to that being a consideration. It's not with the phrase. There's something deeper, and people need to question that and be critical of it, because it shouldn't be that videos of black men losing their lives are proliferated all over the media. It shouldn't be that easy. It shouldn't be that a black life can be extinguished and then almost reveled in. I don't personally watch any of those videos. I don't think it's respectful. I don't think that it's instructive. I don't think it's helpful. I think the fact of the death is enough, and that should be the thing that should enrage us and spur us on to action. I don't think we need to revel in a man's death. I think until go on.
Just the sensationalistic aspect of it is always disheartening.
Exactly. And that is part of it, right? So it's our lives are so devalued that we can sensationalize our deaths, and that isn't something that anybody else would be doing, in any other community, I feel like. And I think it's specifically because it's a black life that's also part of it, and that's also part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. I find it wonderful when I watch a bunch of little kids playing at the school. I used to direct the choir at Whitchurch Highlands, and they honestly didn't see race and color. They just saw a kid that they wanted to play with or not. It's a lovely, lovely world when that's exactly how we all think.
I agree. And, hate is taught. It's not something that we're born with. And so, that's why phrases like Black Lives Matter and movements like it need to exist and need to be proliferated and repeated. And people need to stand in allyship to it. Even if it doesn't personally affect them, it affects us all. Like when there is a segment of society that is oppressed, it affects all of our liberation.
So you're going to continue writing. You've got all kinds of interesting things in the works now. Will you always identify yourself as a black writer?
I personally will, because I don't see the problems of white supremacy being resolved within my lifetime at all. I think it's important because, again, that visibility is important. For example, for me, my name is pretty anglicized. It's pretty generic. You wouldn't know unless you either read my work or read my bio or saw my picture who I am. And so I like to specifically marry my identity to the work that I do. Because again, I don't want whiteness to be the standard. We're all trying to decenter whiteness. and bring marginalized voices to the center and to the focus. And so, like, for me, elevating Black writing is perfectly acceptable, and like I don't get offended by it, and I'm actually proud of it, because for a very long time, like, that identity has been denigrated. As I said, there's a 400-year history of that, and so, like, proudly claiming that and like reiterating that, I don't see any problem with it. I don't think it's, a backward or not pure artistic thing. Like, I don't think there is anything such as pure art. I think you're either upholding the current systems in place or you're opposing them. So I think, like, all work is political, whether you think it's not. I think, like, people who get to talk about, kitchen sink dramas and issues, like, that is a political choice, and that is a political statement that, like, your life is that privileged. Whereas I feel like, writing explicitly about political things isn't just a political act. It is the kind of art that I think, as a Black person, I should be and need to be making, because it's a critical time, and it's a critical juncture in history to be making these points. And I think they're absolutely needed. And so, like, for me, like, writing is about Black liberation, BIPOC liberation, and being a Black writer is part of that.
Do you think your law background helps you with your human rights? And I think, I've heard it said before that the true ways of integrating into a more inclusive community are through the laws of the land.
I think, like, my law background is specifically in, like, criminal defense and criminal law. And obviously, like, Black folks and Indigenous folks are the most hard hit within that system, within the prison industrial complex. And so, like, for me, a lot of my work kind of comes from that and with a perspective of that. For example, like, within my community engaged theater practice, I'm part of a collective of artists called Confluence Arts, and we do work within women's institutions. And we do work with women who have experience with the criminal justice system. And when we make art with them about the things that matter to them, we provide honorariums, snacks, art supplies, and a platform to tell their stories. And we publish them, or we put them on main stages of theater companies. So, like, all of that is to say that I personally believe in prison abolition. I believe in defunding the police, because I think these are just arms and institutions of white supremacy, and until they can demonstrate otherwise, until we're not the most represented after Indigenous people in this country and within North America, within the prison system, despite our small numbers of population, I don't think that those institutions should be supported. So for me personally, that's why I didn't pursue the law, despite being in criminal defense, because even then, to me, I was like, I'm deriving a living from this institution, and I didn't agree with it.
Interesting to do all that education and then come to that conclusion. But no education is ever lost, right? No education is ever a waste. It always teaches you something, even if it teaches you what you don't want to do.
Exactly. But I don't think, like, I don't think that it's I don't think it's a waste, and I don't think that it doesn't make any sense and it's not consistent. Like, again, there is the thing of respectability politics. And so, like, for me, once I decided to pursue the law, like, just going to law school, like, I got accepted, I went, I was like, I will get qualified, I will hold a license to practice, but I will not personally partake in that. And again, that is from a certain amount of privilege. Like, instead I pursued arts, which is, a very privileged profession, especially if you're able to make an income or not need to make a full income out of it. But yeah, so I I don't think they're inconsistent. I think there is still that need to be like, okay, well, this is what I can do. This is who I am in the world. And it does help people to listen to me because, again, like as a Black person, I'm presumed to not have that background or have that access or education level.
Yeah, I guess depends on where you come from, because I wouldn't assume that you didn't have that education just because you're Black. But that may be just me.
Yeah, it might be you and like the way that you're socialized, but like a lot of people wouldn't, because like I said, like for West Indian parents, they'd be like, oh, the artists are the people who couldn't get into school and who couldn't do this and who couldn't be a doctor and couldn't do this. Like that's not true. Like I like showing that and displaying that like I'm not choosing art because I have nothing else to do. I'm choosing because I want to.
Yeah, it was funny. I was in theater my whole life when I was younger. I was always gifted at theater, and my parents refused to even look at it as an option. And when I said I wanted to go to university and be a teacher and teach drama, they were just, what? No, learn how to use a computer. What? No, I don't want to use a computer. Tell us a little bit about community-engaged theater. What is community-engaged theater? You've used the term a number of times, and I'm not sure that the listeners know what that is exactly.
Sure. So there's a branch of art practice that comes from the UK, where professional theater artists like myself, so that's people who present and create work for money, whether it's a good living or not, and use that skill and that expertise to make theater or art with people out in the world who are not professional artists. So community engaged theater pairs professional artists and community members, and they together create a work amongst themselves that is representative of the community's stories and interests. And yeah, that's a whole branch of theater and other art forms that is quite popular and supported by the different arts councils and arts communities in Canada.
So if you went to see a play that was community engagement theater, you would have professionals mixed with just community members? Would it actually be on stage, or would you take those concepts and then create a play that the professionals would perform? Preferably, it would be performed by the community members, so they would get to perform the work that they created. So at least that's how, like the heritage and history of work that I come from and the work that I create, that's how we do it. So like they feel ownership, they get, to be presenting the work, and they get to use their voices and talents. And so like one thing that some, kind of pure artists who are not socially engaged criticize the form is that makes it less professional. That makes it less artistically meritorious. Like that, that will reduce the quality of the art if like untrained people do it. But that's not the point, actually. The like while community engaged artists try to make the work as aesthetic and artistically meritorious as possible, like that it's not perfect, that it's not made by professionals is the point, because it's actually the community that's brought together, that is formed and built within the process. That's what matters. I love the concept. I think it's fantastic on all kinds of different levels. So when you bring these stories in, do you find that people are a little skeptical at first?
Which stories do you mean? Like,
well, I mean, when you're starting to put something together with the community, do you find that people come out in droves and everybody wants to participate, or is it something where they're kind of hesitant because they don't really know what to expect?
Well, I personally work with Black youth, and there are a lot of challenges, obviously, within their lives. And I try to go into communities and neighborhoods that are less represented by the arts. And so, like, to help create access to the programming, we provide food, we provide honoraria. I try to, involve people as much as possible in the decision making, and, have consistent leadership throughout all of the projects. So I don't think it's like a hesitance. I think it's more of like the structural issues that they're working within and the systems that they're working within that prevent participation. So like if as many of those barriers can be alleviated, or like, for example, even like back when there were tokens, like providing tokens or transportation costs so that people can actually get there. That's also part of the work. It's bringing those kinds of folks into the fold rather than, people who are like, not interested or curious or whatever. That's more of the work that I do. So it's more focusing on, bringing together Black youth, uplifting, giving them professional theater training experience so that they can parlay that into whatever they would like, or like, I write recommendation letters for them as they go on in their career, all of those things. So
I guess what I was trying to get at is if you say, I'm going to do this play and everybody's welcome to come, and 2 people show up. Here's your free press token, but you only get 2 people. I mean, people have to feel safe, and they have to feel like they want to be a part of something like that. And I think that to me sounds like the biggest challenge is to get them involved in the first place.
Actually, it's not, because a lot of people do want to be able to do arts work. But again, practical considerations like they need childcare, or they need to help at home, or they need to earn a paycheck. Those are the barriers. I don't think it's that they're not interested. So again, like we try to accommodate all those things. Like if they needed childcare, or if they need the honoraria, they need the tokens, they need a meal when they come, like those are all things that we try to provide. I've definitely never run a program where there is, not much interest. It's more like, okay, how do we keep them being able to access this?
How do we make this work? Yeah, that's really interesting, because I know that there's a lot of things that run in this community in Stouffville, some things that are overrun, but lots of things that's hard to get the initial thing going, just because people are a little skeptical. What, I have to participate? It seems like, But I'm glad that you're getting these kids to come out, or people to come out, because it's not just kids, is it?
No. So it's young people. Yeah. And then, when we present the work, they invite their family and friends, and we always have, a big crowd of people who come to the performances. And they always come like, oh my gosh, it's so like life-changing and like wonderful. And then so we keep doing it. That's really why, to me, the project has continued. It's because we keep having people asking us to come and do things. Like I haven't, like, except for the first time, I haven't gone and thought an opportunity. They've all come to me.
So what if someone that was white came to your theater group and wanted to participate?
Yeah, so that's happened in the past. And then, the person who either invited them or like however they found out, I would just have a frank conversation with them and clarify that it's a Black space. Like, while we, appreciate you coming and whatnot, you're free to come to the performance, but it's a closed space for Black identified people.
And you do that just why? Some would say that that's reverse prejudice. That's not,
it's absolutely not
such a thing.
Yeah, I do that because I prefer to operate within BIPOC spaces, and particularly with intergenerational, it's a Black space. So it's a Black creation space. We interview Black elders. We don't interview white folks or other people of color, because it's about elevating Black voices and Black stories within Toronto and Canada. And that's not anything about prejudice. There have been so many historically white spaces, and that wasn't seen to be a problem. And there still are. So, to say that it's reverse prejudice or anything, like, we are allowed to have our own spaces. We are allowed to have our own experiences. We are allowed to have that because of the harm that has historically and is currently been inflicted on us. And so having safer or safe spaces, that's been a trend. So like having spaces that are exclusive is something that a lot of people are doing. So it's definitely not just me. It's just an important part of being able to be in the world and to bring your best self to it. Sometimes you just don't want to be subjected to another gaze or other perspectives that have traditionally oppressed you. So that's why a lot of spaces go exclusive.
Mm-hmm. To me, it sounds like a safe space.
Yes, safe. And I say safer because no space is technically safe. There's always something. So it's a safer space.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you have a women's group and you're going to be discussing certain things, you don't want the men there, not because the men are bad men, just because you're creating a safe space for women to speak freely about issues that affect them.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm so happy that you were able to join us. I'm really happy that Fresh Waves could contribute something to Black History Month here in Stouffville. And I look forward to all of the things that you have in the works right now, reading your play and and all the rest of the things that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I hope you've had fun coming on Fresh Waves.
Yes, I have. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Fresh Waves. This morning we've been talking with Fiona Raye Clarke. If you'd like more information about the programs that she runs or the things that she's involved with and her writing, just Google Fiona Raye with an E, Clarke with an E. She has a website and all of her information is there. Thanks for tuning in to Fresh Waves, and we'll catch you again next week. Have a great day, everyone. Hi, this is Bren Masson, host of Fresh Waves. Fresh Waves is a talk show and podcast that talks about fresh, new ideas. Actually, sometimes we talk about really old, ancient ideas too that are becoming fresh once more. You can hear us on Whistle FM Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. or go to our website, Freshwaves.ca, to hear the podcasts. We also love to hear your stories and your suggestions, so drop us a line at bren@freshwaves.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Fresh Waves, it really is fresh.